Is it starting?
Yep.
Good evening. My name is Alan Wallace, and we start with chapter 8. Boots crept to the side of my bed and stopped. I couldn't detect movement, but sensed a presence. The anticipation of a next move was torture. I felt like a hooded prisoner waiting for the hangman to drop the trap door. I began screaming like a little girl, but nothing came from the thing in the dark. Who's there? I asked again in a pitiful voice. The room was spinning, but I was sure that there was a man by my bed, a man or monster. From my prone position, he was huge, a looming evil that meant to do who knew what. Sober, I would have jumped up and fought him, but drunk and dizzy, I was as helpless as a baby bird. Speak to me, I demanded, sounding about as dangerous as one. I sensed more than saw a hand coming toward me, so I rolled across the bed screaming and landed on the floor under a window. The room spun so much I couldn't stand, and while I struggled, the intruder ran back down the hall and out the front door. I heard it slam long before I was able to follow. I made it as far as the porch, hung over the railing, and vomited. By then, he was long gone. I wanted to call Barney or my father, was too ashamed. I couldn't let them see me smelling like a tequila and so full of rage and sadness. I sat in the wicker chair and cried and rocked myself. After a while, I became captivated by the big star Texas night, and my misery eased itself to the shadows. Eventually, I went back inside and checked my Beretta. Was it ready to fire? I lay down in bed and shoved it under my pillow and slept. Getting up was hard, and I did it at 6:30 so I'd have time to get ready slowly. I showered, dressed in blue jeans and a t-shirt, and then looked for a clue of the identity of the monster. When the search turned up nothing, I sat at the kitchen table and drank tea, hot tea, and tried to eat dry toast. I wasn't sure there had really been a monster. I choked down a handful of ibuprofen and made it to work by 9 o'clock. Barney was already there. When I saw him, I wanted to sob on his shoulder and admit how desolate my life had become and how hopeless I felt when I drank and how I couldn't stop. Instead, I went to my office and sank into my favorite chair. Yesterday, I had been a superhero, or at least John Wayne. Today, I was weeping in my office with my insides twisting like a desert willow in the high wind. Rico's, Barney yelled. What? Do you want to talk about it? No. Within seconds, his extra large frame filled the door to my office. He handed me a Dr. Pepper, his cure for everything. Don't take this wrong, but you look like death warmed over. I feel like it too. Did somebody hit you? There's a red mark on your cheek. Mandy's mother slapped me. Is that why you're crying? No. The Dr. Pepper tasted wonderful, cold and fizzy. Barney perched in his big self on the edge of my desk and looked at me the way my father did when I was little and did something wrong. It was a mixture of anger, humor, and affection. Spill it, Ricos. I began crying again. It's too lame for words. Spill it, or I'll get it out of you the hard way. I knew he'd never hurt me, but I spilled it anyway. Why didn't you call? Don't you trust me? Sure I do, and I wanted to, but I didn't have my phone. What about afterward? You could have called me then. His big blue eyes were boring holes into me. Stop it, Barney. What are you looking at? Right now, I'm looking at a tin star with a drunk pin to it. he drawled in his best yet imitation of John Wayne. Okay, John, give it a rest. You asked for that one, Rico's. Stop looking at me like that. He shook his head slowly. Rico's, Rico's, Rico's. We're the law in these here parts, and you're too drunk. If you're too drunk to kick butt, I'll come kick it for you. He held his big fist up in a boxer pose. I laughed and stopped crying and whining. Was your door locked, he asked. No, I hardly ever lock my door. Will you start locking it? It's locked now. That was too much like the horse in the barn story, and I wanted to cry again. Tell me about the man. Can you give a description? Well, no. I never really saw a man. I heard boots walking towards me, and they stopped by the bed. Did he touch you? No. I rolled away to the floor. Who would come into your house like that? I don't know. My friends would knock. Barney thought about it. Maybe some drunk came to the wrong house, and when he started screaming, he left. Maybe. Maybe I imagined it. Do you think so? His eyes were so sad I couldn't look at him. Oh, Rico, she said and sighed. I tried to change the subject. What am I going to do about Jimmy Joe? You want me to talk to him? No, that'll make it worse. Have you told Schutz you're not interested? Many times. And he comes to bug you? Yes. We made a connection. Yes, he says we made a connection. That's what he's after, a connection. You know, your part with his part, and I held up my hands. Stop right there. I know about sex. Barney reddened. Well, that's what old Schutz wants. Never going to happen. He refuses to accept that you're not interested in him or his part. Maybe you should talk to the sheriff. That'd be like telling the teacher on him. Those Alpine deputies would tell on you first chance they had. I know, but I'm not like them. Maybe the kid that raped Mandy was in my house last night trying to scare me. Why would he take a chance like that? Maybe he heard that I was talking to her. He frowned, thoughtful. I'm going to make a report. Please don't. Why not? Sheriff Ben will see it. I'm going to quit drinking, Barney. I wish you would. Sheriff Ben doesn't have to see anything to know what's going on. He's like God. One of the total blabbermouths will tell him sooner or later. He only has to see you on a day like today, but that's not the reason. Then what is your reason? You're going to get yourself killed by some pervert because you're too drunk to stop him. Or worse, alcohol will kill you the slow way. I'm going to quit. Barney left on another murder interview while I went in search of a crime scene. Truck Heckert's place was about 20 minutes from our office, depending on road conditions. Today it was dusty and washboarded, but all the arroyo crossings were dry and had been for over a month. According to the local porch news commentator, Truck had come to Terlingua under suspicious circumstances. That would describe how we got about a third of our population. But I gave newcomers the benefit of the doubt until they proved to be a problem. Supposedly, Truck drowned his wife in a stock tank at his ranch and got away with it. His story was that she fell in, and though it was only chest deep, she panicked and drowned. Thirsty cattle found her floating body. I didn't know how a tale can be more pure Texan than that. According to poach pundits, the good old boy system of justice in Hicksville, Texas, didn't try too hard to find the facts and accepted Truck's version at face value. They fumbled the investigation and passed the ball back and forth until they were too far out of bounds. The game had to be called. Whether Truck Heckert is a murderer or not, I couldn't say, but his place could easily belong to one. He lives in a shack he constructed with scavenged wood. It was meant to be temporary, but time marched on and the shack endures. It's situated at the edge of a shaded canyon where sunlight seldom touches it. That made the scene sinister. And although I didn't personally know Truck, and despite him keeping an open mind, I approached with caution. A battered old blue Chevy truck was parked near the house, but no one came to the door when I knocked. The unofficial junkyard was located a short walk up the canyon. It seemed the perfect dark setting for violent crime. The old trucks and cars had been shoved off the canyon edge, and since then, rubbish of every kind had been thrown at the pile. I found boot prints in the sand, but not multiple sets. That made me think this couldn't be the place, but it had to be because I didn't know another. I winced at the nasty pile of stinking garbage. So far, in the southern part of the county, there are no zoning laws, both a good and a bad thing. On the whole, we're people who don't want to be told what to do, and especially by a governing body 80 miles away. So technically, if a person wants to throw trash on their own land, that's okay, except it isn't. I think there should be a prison sentence for leaving junk in the desert. The more junk, the longer the sentence. Under my new law, Truck would be looking at life. I watched the ground for sounds of a struggle, torn clothing, a condom, anything that could be evidence of rape. How evil to bring a girl to such a filthy, terrifying place on a dark night and rape her. I wanted to not think about it, but it's hard to look for a crime scene and not think about the crime. I came upon a condom that looked too desiccated to have been used recently. I picked at it with a stick to be sure and left it. When a large raven flew over the canyon, cawing loudly, I jumped. I tried to laugh at myself, but it wasn't funny. Then I heard something behind me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I peered over my shoulder. There was nothing there, and the sound stopped. But when I started moving again, so did something or someone else. My Beretta was in the vehicle, probably laughing its trigger off at me. At that point, my imagination took off, fueled by dozens of horror movies. I reminded myself I rounded one end of the pile, still seeking nothing, my heart galloping. The desire to run was as keen as the desire to demand justice for Mandy. 2 seconds before I took off, I was grabbed from behind by strong arms that lifted me off the ground. Something akin to Sasquatch would eat me for dinner or worse. A beard, fur, tickled the back of my neck, and the thing's breath smelled like it had been eating burned rubber. What do you think you're doing? It was human and probably Truck. Then something hard pressed against my backside. From experience, I would say it wasn't a gun. Answer me, he growled in my ear. I started stuttering. I'm looking for something. I'm a deputy sheriff. Yeah, that put the fear of God in him. You're no deputy. What are you looking for? Trouble? As suddenly as he grabbed me, he let me go. I turned to face him even though I wanted to run as hard as I could. He held up his hands. I saw your vehicle and thought I'd have a little fun with you. No harm done. It wasn't fun for me. You're trespassing, and I didn't assault you. I glared at him. Before I spoke, he said, if you're a deputy, then you know about trespass laws. You know I'm a deputy. You saw the vehicle. Yeah, so you should know about the law. I didn't realize this was your property, I lied. I thought it was a county dump. Well, he looked sheepish. I don't prosecute you if you won't. He held out his hand. I saw the fleeting image of a woman floating down, face down, in a metal stock tank, her dark hair fanned around her head. I'm Truck Heckert. I tried to shake the image and shook his hand. I'm Margarita Ricos. For real, what are you looking for? I'm looking for the evidence of a crime. It is no crime to throw trash on your own property. I'm aware of that, but why would you want to? I didn't give him a chance to answer, although his response might have been interesting. I'm looking for the scene of the rape. Look here. I never raped nobody. Maybe I gave you the wrong impression, but no one is accusing you. But I think the crime happened somewhere around these old trucks. Why do you think that? The victim indicated there were old truck bodies at the scene, but she didn't know where she was. She wasn't here. I don't let people come back here. And when I see their lights, I put a stop to it. Kids used to come partying and necking up on their rim, but I called a halt to that. Partying and necking on the rim was how I knew about the truck graveyard, but that was before truck moved there. I better not catch anyone shoving a vehicle off here either, he said. I'm glad you put a stop to that. Damn right, I stopped that shit. If you don't mind, I'd like to look around a little more. Knock yourself out. When you're done, come up to the house for a beer. Thanks, but I'm working. Suit yourself. Scratched his head. Hey, you married? Yes, sir. That figures. He wandered off in the direction of his house. I went back to the Explorer and stuck my Beretta into the waistband of my jeans. It was another case of shutting the barn door after the horse escaped, but I didn't want to think about it. My head was killing me, and the stench of rotting garbage made the nausea return. I searched for a while longer, but came up with nada, which meant that there had to be another truck graveyard. But where? Mandy could be mistaken. She was under plenty of stress, but I couldn't believe she imagined the creepy old vehicles. I drove to the Robbins home, fearful that I smelled like a gutter drunk, in spite of breath mints. Eating breath mints inside me made me think of Truck's awful breath in my ear. But I dragged myself away from that nightmare in pursuit of a different one. Julie Roberts came to the door, and when she saw me, looked afraid. I'm sorry I slapped you, she said before I said anything. I was glad to see that her hair was washed and she looked less haunted. It's all right, Julie. I know you must be frantic and heart-struck. You have no idea. Would you like to come in? I'll only be a second. I came to get the clothes Mandy was wearing. The sheriff mentioned I'd be by to pick them up. She hesitated, her nose wrinkled in disgust. I put them in the trash. They're ruined. I need them. Whatever for? I'd like to look at them. Her expression said she thought I was insane, but she went to get them and came back with a stuffed plastic grocery bag. How's Mandy doing? She's asleep now. I think she'll be okay eventually. I'm taking her to see a counselor tomorrow. That's good. Will you tell her I said hello? I turned to leave, then back to her. Did you notice the car or truck that brought Mandy home Saturday night? No, I heard it, but I didn't realize it would be Mandy until she came in the door. I went back to my Explorer, opened the back, put on gloves, and took out the clothes. Everything was there. A short, tan cotton shirt, a lightweight embroidered blue blouse that was beautiful before it was ripped off her. Her bra and underpants were torn as well. The skirt was filthy, wrinkled, and stained with who knew what, but I thought semen would be the one thing. All but one of the buttons were missing from the blouse. They would probably be at the scene. And as I was placing each item in the evidence bag, a small boy in a cowboy hat rode up on a bike and stared at me. Hello, I said. Why aren't you in school? Because Mandy's hurt. Are you her brother? Yes, I'm Michael, but everybody calls me Little Tex. Are you the cops? I'm Deputy Ricos. How come you ain't got a uniform or gun? I didn't wear it today. I hope you're taking good care of Mandy. He wrinkled his nose. She fights with me. I guess older sisters can be difficult. Yeah. He looked around guiltily and then whispered, I know something. I know something. I squatted to his level. What do you know? You won't tell my mom? No. I was supposed to be in bed, but I wasn't. I was looking in the yard for my dog, Buster, and I saw some boys bringing Mandy home. Do you know them? I couldn't see them good enough, but I saw the truck. What kind was it? It was high up and black, with big tires, and it was loud. That's a huge help, Little Tex. Anything else? A boy said bad words. Should I tell you anyway? Yes, please do. He said, open your mouth and I'll kill you, bitch. Don't forget it. I ain't fucking kidding. Little Tex sighed and glanced around again. I'm not allowed to say bitch or fucking. Thank you for telling me. Mandy's scared. Are you scared too? No, Little Tex. I'm going to put these boys in prison where they can never hurt Mandy again. That's good. I want her to be like she was before, even if she hits me.